I am here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. And Alexander, I want your quick take, and I want you to just let us know, has the EU and the UK come up with a deal for Brexit?
Well, all the reports that are appearing at the moment suggest that some kind of a deal has been agreed. Allegedly, there's a technical document, whatever that means, but that it hasn't yet been reduced to a complete text. Theresa May is supposed to be meeting with the various members of her cabinet, those are the senior members of her government this evening. There's then going to be a cabinet meeting tomorrow where they're going to discuss it. And then the plan is apparently for yet another cabinet meeting. This is very like the style of Theresa May, by the way, do everything as slowly as possible. There'll supposedly be another cabinet meeting at which they're supposed to sign off with it. Based on what I'm reading and hearing, it is going to be a very unpopular package indeed. It appears to be working towards keeping Britain inside the customs union, the EU customs union, until a situation arises where Britain decides that it might want to leave the customs union, but in order to leave the customs union, it will have to apply to a tribunal which will have to agree to that happening. I think there will be an awful lot of people who are going to be very unhappy with that proposal.
Can you explain a little bit for myself and for the viewers what exactly it means for the UK to be inside the customs union but out of the EU? What does that really mean, practically speaking?
Well, what it means essentially is that Britain remains, for all economic purposes, a part of the EU. It trades with the rest of the EU as if it was a part of the EU. All the trade arrangements are conducted according to EU regulations. The EU has lots of regulations on goods and services and all the rest, administered by the European Court of Justice. The major change, the thing that will have changed radically, is that because Britain is not a member of the EU as of the 29th of March 2019, it will have no say in the regulations and policies and directives that the EU will be producing, which will regulate that trade. So a lot of people are saying, and I agree with those people, that this effectively and essentially makes Britain a EU economic colony.
It seems to me that they're in an even worse position than being inside the EU if they have no say on the laws and the regulation. They have to follow what the EU hands down to them, but they have no influence over those provisions and those regulations in order to do business?
I think that is exactly right. I think you are absolutely right. I think lots of people are saying it. Both people who are on the leave side, who want to leave the European Union, like Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, and also some people, increasingly large numbers of people, who are actually on the Remain side. People like Joe Johnson, Boris Johnson's brother, who is pro-EU. He said, what was the point of all that? We could have done better, stay within the EU, than what Theresa May has negotiated for us. And he is right. What I predict is going to happen is that I think there will be some anger, but I think most of the cabinet will go along with this proposal. I think most of the Conservative Party will in the end go along with this proposal, despite them being very unhappy about it, because they don't want to see the government fall, because they're so worked up about the dangers of a Jeremy Corbyn administration. So I think this deal will be put together, and I think it will stick, and I predict as night follows day that people will become more and more angry about it over time, and in a year or so, or perhaps a bit longer, there will be more pressure for a further referendum for Britain to quit this arrangement also. Now, there will be legal complications about doing that, which we can discuss on another programme later, but I don't think this story is ended at all.
Is this a big win for the EU?
Yes, I think it is a big win for the EU, because from their point of view, they got Britain exactly where they wanted it. They've got Britain, we've said, an economic vassal state of the European Union. And I think the ultimate objective of the EU is to keep Britain within the customs union indefinitely. So from their point of view, it's difficult to see what they lose. They gain because the British are no longer within the EU central institutions, the European Council, the Council of Ministers, the European Parliament, where they were, let's be frank about it, a generally disruptive influence. And at the same time, they keep all the economic advantages of having Britain still in the customs union. So I think the EU has done very well out of this agreement.
Explain a little bit what because I was reading a little bit about the agreement, and not that much information has come out as of yet. But they were saying that they've also figured out the question of Ireland, and they've created the Irish backstop. What does that mean?
Yes, I mean, what it means, and this is the idea about Britain being in the customs union. So Britain will be in the customs union. That will allow a frictionless border with Ireland. Now, the backstop was this fatal concession that Theresa May made in December last year, where she agreed that whatever happened, there would be a frictionless border in Ireland, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland in the south, so that people and goods would be able to move across this border without any kind of customs checks or border posts or anything of that kind. Now, the only way that was possible was by keeping Britain in the customs union, and as we've seen, that's what the EU has now managed to achieve. And that was the purpose, in my opinion, of insisting on the backstop. Now, what the arrangement is supposed to be is that the British have said that they have to be able to leave the customs union and end the backstop at some point in the future. And the agreement that's been made is that there will be a tribunal which will be represented. There will be a representative from the EU, there will be a representative from Britain, and there will supposedly be a neutral person. And this tribunal will decide whether or not Britain is allowed to leave the customs union. Now, consider how humiliating that is, Alex. Britain cannot make a decision about whether or not it is able to leave the customs union by itself. It will need, in theory, the permission of a tribunal, of a committee to do it. If that is not an abdication of sovereignty, a loss of sovereignty, I do not know what is.
It's everything that Farage campaigned against, it seems to me.
Exactly, and that is exactly right. I mean, it is a vassal state situation, and I would add that, in any situation, and we're talking about neutral people, the third neutral person who will share this tribunal. We all know that that person will side with the EU on most matters. So it is a disgraceful capitulation. I don't think it's going to end because people like Nigel Farage are not going to go away. That's why, as I said at the start of this program, I predict that in a couple of years' time, when people have reorganized and have got over the shock of this thing and the anger has perhaps crystallized a little, we will see a further campaign, possibly, very probably led by Nigel Farage, for a further referendum to end this impossible arrangement. And I predict that in a couple of years' time, that is where we will be.
And can I finally say, Alexander, it seems to me that the whole Irish border dispute, it seems to me, I have a feeling that May got duped. She got out-negotiated, and the EU kind of created this distraction of this Irish border issue, which wasn't that big an issue. It sounds to me that it could have been solved very easily, but they put all the focus on the Irish border to get to the meat of what the EU wanted, which is that vassal state being the UK. They wanted that status of the UK being in the customs union without any power. So they kind of misdirected, it seems to me, they misdirected a lot of May's attention on the Irish issue while the EU was negotiating the heart of the matter, which was the custom union's arrangement.
You are absolutely right. That is exactly what happened. When it was done in December of last year, Theresa May was led by the EU to think that she was actually negotiating a concession of no great importance, because this whole thing was going to be a temporary thing and it didn't really matter because something would be sorted out. And of course, the trouble is that Theresa May conducted the entire negotiation with the EU essentially by herself and bringing in only a very small cabal of negotiators, a very small group of people, and tried to do it all in secret. So when she made this concession, she made it without really consulting widely or indeed at all. So that's what happened when you do this kind of thing with people like the EU who have formidable negotiators. I mean, the EU is extremely practiced in negotiating these sort of deals. They just ran over Theresa May like a bulldozer runs over a hedgehog.
Yeah, it's incredible how outmatched Theresa May just looks.
Exactly.
The outcome speaks for itself.
The outcome speaks for itself.
So if this deal is what it is and it passes, what do you think's going to happen? Is it going to be a huge uproar?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's not absolutely sure that it will pass. I mean, absolutely nobody in Britain likes this deal. The Conservative Party loathes it. Most of the Labour Party who want to stay in the EU also loathe it for their own various reasons. It is by no means guaranteed that it will pass the House of Commons. I think it will. I think in the end, the Conservative Party will hold together to vote for this thing, because they don't want to see a Labour government and nobody wants to be blamed for Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister. I think also there will be enough Labour MPs who don't want to be seen voting against Brexit who will also support this thing. So I think it will pass. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I may be wrong, but I think it will pass. I think we will have a deal. I think Britain will leave the EU in this abject way in March 2019. But I come back to what I said. I think this will be a very temporary arrangement, because despite all these elaborate arrangements which have been made to keep Britain in the customs union, I think there will be a revolt against it eventually in Britain, and I suspect that people like Farage and the other Leave people will reorganise and will start campaigning against this. And though tearing up this agreement would be tearing up an international treaty which has severe implications in international law terms, doing something like that unilaterally may not be in theory possible. I think in reality we could get eventually a referendum followed by what would in effect be a unilateral declaration of independence by Britain from the EU, but that would have to be under another government.
Jeez. So Britain left the EU to become a vassal state of the EU.
Yes. And I think the political leaders who led Britain into this calamity will not be forgiven by the British people.
We will end it at that. Alexander Mercouris, thank you for your quick take. Guys, visit the Duran shop, buy a t-shirt. This is our new V-neck right here that I'm wearing. So they're really, really nice, really comfortable. They fit great. Also, in the description box down below, you can find links to our PayPal and Patreon page. Please donate. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Until next time, take care.
Take care.